So if you are buying a property on Lake Hartwell, please understand this very important fact. You are not just buying your property, you are in a partnership with the United States Army Corps of Engineers. Now, first, let's take a quick look at the lake, and I'll explain exactly what that means. So this is 962 miles of shoreline that spans over 2 states, okay, and 6 counties. So you'll see some places where you see Georgia, here, and then South Carolina. So obviously, this is a lot of water to maintain. Now, I want to give you a quick example of what I mean by you are in a relationship and sharing your property with the Corps of Engineers. So typically when you see property lines, you're going to see that they go all the way to the end of the property. But if you notice on all these properties, the blue part is water. And so you'll see that the property lines are short, but then there's still land. So who owns this land and what's happening with it? So this person owns all of this property. Right here is what starts what we call the core property. So from here to the water, the Army Corps of Engineers owns this property. Now, can they use it? Yes. In fact, here's their boat dock that they paid for that they get to use. Now, in a situation like this guy, you'll see that while they do still own their property here, there's a long distance to the water, and the Corps would own all of this property. So you'll just see some properties have different amenities. Obviously, it's a little nicer to be closer to the water. You're more likely to have a view. Maybe the topography is not as steep. A lot of different amenities. These people right here, you can see they're hyper close to the water. That's super rare to find. Whereas these people, they're quite a distance away from the water. And in fact, if you're in a cove, it could prove to be shallow as well. But the biggest thing to understand on Lake Hartwell is that yes, you will own access to use the water, but the Army Corps of Engineers is going to control what you can do with your core line. Now, let me explain what that means. Because the goal is to protect against erosion and any weird things we may do. Now, I say weird things like, let's say typically we put down sod, we have pesticides. Well, they don't really want that going into our natural resource. So the entire reason that the Army Corps of Engineers controls what you do with that property, that land between your house and your land that you own and the land that they own in the water, is to make sure that that natural filtration system stays natural. So we're not putting pesticides there. We're not putting permanent structures there. They like to see the grass. They like to see the pine needles that fall and all the natural litter that we call that would land on the property, because that's going to help protect against erosion, and that's going to help protect against, us poisoning our fish, our natural bodies that live in our water, right? So there are a couple ways that they do this. Number one, whenever you go to buy a property, you're going to do what's known as a courtesy inspection with your ranger. There are an appropriate number of rangers on the lake right now, and they are each assigned to different areas. Most of them have been doing this for a really long time. So they're first going to come out and say, hey, is the current owner following all of the rules? We hope that they are. If not, there could be fines, and they could make them do certain things. Sometimes they're also following all the rules, but there's something that has taken place they didn't know about. For instance, let's say maybe the trees are further apart than they should be. Right now, the requirement is that all trees have to be 18 feet away from each other on center, and you basically have to have trees every 18 feet on center. So if there aren't enough trees, they're going to ask that you would plant trees. You can also take some trees down. If they're dead or dying and they're considered unsafe, they will allow you to take those trees down, but you will have to replant after you take the dead tree down, or the hazardous tree down, I should say. Also with trees, you can do something called limbing up. So look at the base of the tree and then how tall it is. You can limb up 1/3 the tree's height. 1/3 the tree's height. So from the bottom, 1/3 of the tree's height, or 18 feet. Okay, whichever comes first. So if it's a small tree, you can't do 12 feet. 12 feet is how high it can go. But you can do 1/3. So basically from the bottom, the ground here, up 1/3 of the tree's height, up to 18 feet, okay? So limbing up means that you can then maybe have a view, maybe you clean it up so you can have safe path and travel down to the water. It's funny, I always say that people often want to limb up the trees so they can hopefully have a view of the water, but the Corps does not even let you do that because they want you to have a view. They do that so you can have a safe path to the water without branches hitting you in the face as you walk down to your beautiful water. Also, with regard to what you can do on the property, you can maybe have a picnic table that you walk down there and you enjoy your lunch by the lake, but they don't want permanent structures on this property again. They want it unobstructed. They want natural debris to be there. They want it to be a filtration system, so you're not going to pour concrete unless it's an approved golf cart path. Again, there are certain parameters there. They have to be on grade. There's a certain size they can be. There's a certain color they have to be, and you'll have to get approval and get a permit for that as well. But the main thing here is they're trying to protect their natural resource, which is the lake, so they do have control over their property. Now, if you don't like the idea of someone having control of your property, then you would want to look at buying a property that had a shorter core line. So I'm going to go back to this image really quickly. And so I was showing you, again, someone like this owns almost all their property. There's very little property owned by the Corps of Engineers, as you can see, where their property line ends and the core line starts the water. But I will tell you that generally speaking, it's pretty expensive to find a property with what we call a short core line. Certain things impact value. So number one, how close are you to the core line? Two, how deep is the water? So obviously, if you're in a cove, you can't tell this here, but the water will be more shallow. So even if you're right on top of this line right here, if like, let's say the property line were right here, it probably would be as expensive because the water is more shallow. But if you have deeper water towards the end of the cove, or obviously on a point, and you're really close to the water, meaning there's not a lot of core property that has to be protected, then you're going to be looking at paying a premium, because that is super rare on our lake. But if the property sits back further from the water, if you are going to see that maybe you even have more shallow water, you're in a cove, you're going to see that property values are not as high. But again, your big thing that you want to investigate is how close are you to the water if you want to control more of your property. But again, knowing that you're going to pay a premium to be able to experience that. So number one thing to understand, not to be surprised by, you are in partnership with the Army Corps of Engineers. Now, personally, because I've grown up on this lake, I love that they do what they do, because we want to enjoy this lake for a very long time. Lake Hartwell is one of the largest recreational lakes in the Southeast. I've enjoyed this my entire life since I was a young little girl, and so have my children, and I hope my grandchildren and great-grandchildren can as well. But we've been able to do this because the Army Corps of Engineers protects our lake, the way that it's used, the way that it functions, and so we have been able to enjoy it for quite some time. But in order to do that for many years to come, we need to continue to have these shoreline management practices in place. And also, there's a lot of things that you can do on this lake to help you enhance your lifestyle. For instance, there are some properties where you can have a better view of the water based upon the topography, where the trees are, the positioning of the home. If you want to have, again, more control of your property, finding a property with a shorter core line where you're closer to the water, there are different ways to experience a unique lifestyle where you have a little bit more control, but there's usually a premium to pay for that. So know that you're working with the Army Corps of Engineers, and there's lots more to know on this topic: permits, how you apply, what you can expect, and that is coming in another video. Stay tuned.